Good morning. It is time to rise and shine. My name is Haley Jacob, and I'm your host for the Rise and Shine podcast. Yesterday, we left off right before dawn on Friday morning. We left off with Peter having just denied Jesus 3 times, and he was weeping. And right after he denied him the third time, the rooster crows. So we are at dawn on Friday morning. So in the temple this morning, the first lamb of the Tamid sacrifice was led out to the altar at this time at dawn. The high priest had to approve the selection. It had to be inspected one more time to make sure that this lamb was without fault or without blemish. The lambs that were used for the Tamid had to be like perfect, spotless lambs. They had to be pure. There couldn't be like a single hair that wasn't like in place, wasn't white. It had to be perfect. And then this lamb had to be visible for 3 hours before the sacrifice so that everyone can see how perfect it was. At the same time, at dawn on Friday morning, the Jewish authorities took Jesus to the residence of the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. John 18:28 says, "Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat at the Passover." So there were certain rules that the Jews had to follow to stay clean. Again, this is before all of this takes place before Jesus died on the cross and wipes away our sins. And so they had to follow these rules to stay clean, to stay holy. And that's also why they had to make these daily sacrifices, because humans we're sinful, right? We live in a world of sin. We're born into sin. And so we have to, they had to do all these things to make themselves clean. And if they were unclean, they weren't able to eat at the Passover. So the Jewish Sanhedrin, so they brought him over to Pontius Pilate because the Jewish Sanhedrin did not have the authority to carry out the death sentence. They were able to pronounce it against Jesus. They were able to put the sentence upon Jesus, but they were not able to carry out that death sentence. Only the Roman rulers had the power over life and death. So John 18:31 says, "Pilate said, 'Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law.' 'But we have no right to execute anyone,' the Jews objected." So Pontius Pilate really, at the beginning, wanted nothing to do with it. He's like, this is a matter for the Jewish people. Why are you bringing him here? But they brought him to him because they could not carry out the sentence that they wanted. So when Jesus was sent to Pilate, they sent him into the palace. They did not go in. And because the Passover lasted like 7-8 days, so the days are different. The way they counted the days, their days began at sundown. So I think I said 7 days at one point, 8 days. It's just because they count their days a little differently. They didn't want to go in because they wanted to eat at the Passover. So Pontius Pilate really found like no fault in him, but the Jews were like, "But this is who we want." And he asked the group, like, what who do you want to be released to you? Because they had another prisoner, Barabbas, who was a thief. And they said, "Let Barabbas go. We want Jesus crucified." And so Jesus was selected by the high priest for sacrifice. Caiaphas pronounced 3 times that he must die, while Pontius Pilate, the Gentile Roman governor, pronounced him 3 times without fault or blemish. Remember, the Tamid lamb had to be perfect. It had to be without fault or blemish. And Pontius Pilate 3 times found him innocent without fault or blemish. But finally, Pilate gave in to that pressure to have Jesus crucified and sent him to Golgotha. Remember, they were like hounding him, like, "No, just let Barabbas go. We want Jesus crucified." So Mark 15:15 says, wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. So Jesus was tried, condemned, and crucified all on Friday, the 15th of Nisan. So while all of this is taking place, this is during the daytime festivities of the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. So all the righteous Jews and many of Jesus' supporters were at the temple attending the liturgical services. They were busy being involved in the Passover festivities. So the chief priests and Pharisees planned this out and kind of snuck it in while people were busy, while people were distracted, so that they wouldn't discover what happened to Jesus until it was too late to intervene to save him. So they had planned this out. All week I've been telling you that they've been like, okay, planning, but we can't do it now because people will be angry. We can't do it yet, right before the Passover, because they're prepping, they're not as distracted. So this was their moment. This was their moment that they had planned out to do it while people were distracted, and then it would be too late to intervene. Then at 9 a.m., Jesus was crucified on the altar of the cross. Again, 9 a.m. is the time every single day that the first Tamid sacrifice is sacrificed. Mark 15:25 says, "It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him." At the temple, meanwhile, the first lamb of the daily Tamid was sacrificed, and again, this Tamid sacrifice focused on the atoning for sins and restoration of relationship with God. That's what the Tamid sacrifice was meant for. Again, they had several different types of sacrifices with different reasons, with different meanings. This daily sacrifice was the atonement of sins and the restoration of relationship with God. So that was in Jewish time, that was about the third hour, but in our time, it was about 9 o'clock a.m. Jesus was on the cross for 6 hours until his death at 3 p.m. So he was crucified at 9 a.m., was on the cross for 6 hours, and died at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. is when the second Tamid sacrifice takes place. The Tamid sacrifice that was meant for, I know I keep repeating this, but I really want you to see this correlation, atoning of sins and the restoration of relationship with God. And remember, Tamid sacrifice means standing sacrifice, right? They did it daily because it was a standing sacrifice. It was something they needed to do every day. Luke 23:44-46 says, "It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. For the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' When he had said this, he breathed his last." Meanwhile, back at the temple, the second Tamid sacrifice was being offered, a sacrifice for atonement and restoration. So Jesus is the true Tamid sacrifice, and it gives that meaning of true standing sacrifice, not standing as in it's a standing commitment that we have to do every single day. Now standing means he did it once, and that's all that is needed. It's a standing sacrifice because he is the true and perfect sacrifice. Those lambs weren't good enough to last forever. That's why they had to do it twice a day, every day. But Jesus is the true Tamid sacrifice. After Jesus has died on the cross at 3 p.m., the sun was dark. He breathed his last. Before sundown, which again, they start a new day at sundown. So before sundown, which would have been before the start of their Sabbath day. So their Sabbath was Saturday. Jesus was removed from the cross and buried in a borrowed tomb. So that tomb wasn't even meant for Jesus because this was so unexpected to them. They wouldn't have planned out, a tomb for them. This was a borrowed tomb. One of his followers said, this tomb, I have this tomb in my family. Let's put him there. Okay. Luke 23:50 through 54. Now there was a man named Joseph, not Joseph, Jesus's father, different Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man who had not consented to their decision and action. He came from the Judean town of Arimathea, and he was waiting for the kingdom of God. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down, wrapped it in linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one in which no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. So again, just like when the Jews prepare for the Passover by clearing out all the yeast in their home the day before, they prepare for that day. The Jews prepare for Sabbath, because Sabbath, you cannot do any type of work. You're not supposed to do anything on Sabbath. It is truly a day of rest. So that means that they have to prepare and get their homes ready, get everything ready so that they can rest the next day and not do anything the next day. So it's a lot of preparation. So this is going on while they are preparing for the Sabbath. So on Friday evening, which is the beginning of the Sabbath, the chief priests convinced Pilate to guard the tomb to keep the disciples from stealing the body, because they started to remember, oh, Jesus has been telling them after 3 days, I'm going to rise again. So what if, because he said that, what if the disciples try to steal his body on the Sabbath day before, while nobody's looking, while nobody's supposed to be doing anything? What if they steal his body to try to pretend that Jesus has risen from the dead? So Matthew 27:62, the next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, and this is technically on their Saturday, but it's probably took place Friday evening, again, because of how they counted their days. We remember that while he was still alive, the deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. The last deception will be worse than the first. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. Luke 23:55 through 56 says, the women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how the body was laid. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. So when Joseph from Arimathea took the body down, and there were these women, part of Jesus's followers, that were with him, they watched Joseph prepare the body. They watched how he was laid in the tomb. So they knew exactly what everything looked like before the tomb was sealed. And this was before they went home to kind of get it to prepare. And it says they went home and prepared spices and perfumes that were meant for the body, because they knew that they couldn't do it on Saturday. They had to come back on Sunday and do it after the Sabbath, but they couldn't prepare the spices on Saturday, so they had to prepare it before the Sabbath. So that's kind of what that verse is talking about. So this is the end of Friday. Jesus has been crucified. He was put on the cross at 9 a.m. and he died at 3 p.m. The 2 times in which, at the same time during those times, at the temple, the 2 Tamid lambs were being sacrificed. His body is in the tomb, with Roman guards standing watch at all times. Our passage today is going to come from Matthew 27, and it's the whole chapter. When morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor. Then, when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. They said, What is that to us? See to it yourself. And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, "And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them to the potter's field as the Lord directed me." Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, the King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him and led him away to be crucified. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by the name. They compelled this man to carry his cross, and when they came to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed it with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from that cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried up with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, Lema sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders hearing it said, "This man is calling Elijah." And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." And Jesus cried out with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many of the bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." There were also many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, 'While he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise.' Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people, 'He has risen from the dead,' and the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone.